Protect your DNA. BioPQQ can promote formation of new mitochondria. Infowarsstore.com.
Tonight, as we just said, we're going to have a live event coverage of Julian Assange and Wikileaks releasing what many believe will be the long-promised October surprise against Hillary Clinton. And in anticipation of that today, Wikileaks put up a tweet, Hillary Clinton on Julian Assange, quote, "Can't we just drone this guy?" As we point out in the Infowars article, the Washington Examiner notes that during the same time, the State Department was involved in discussions on what non-legal methods were available to subdue Assange. This came out. Now, understand what non-legal methods they could use. Not non-lethal, but non-legal. You know, things like framing him in Sweden for raping two women simultaneously. They say the emails previously released from Clinton's private server reveal Anne Marie Slaughter, former director of policy at State Department, sent an email on the same day in 2010 on the subject of possible non-legal strategies for dealing with WikiLeaks. The email also notes that a meeting was held that day to discuss WikiLeaks. And as we've all seen, the Fox News report, Fox business commentator Bob Beckel disgustingly talking about, can't we just kill Julian Assange? And he wasn't joking, folks. You look at that clip, you understand. He says, a dead man can't leak stuff, he said. This guy is a traitor. He's not. He's not an American citizen, quite frankly. He's treasonous, and he's broken every law of the United States. I'm not for the death penalty, so, well, there's only one way to do it. Illegally shoot the son of a bitch. That's the way you deal with people when you don't like the free speech. That's the way you deal with people when they expose the crimes of our leaders. You call for their execution or imprisonment like they have done as well with Snowden. And again, when we look at this, this article we had today, October 3rd, from Paul Joseph Watson, an exclusive article, very detailed article from an Indian Christian pastor who runs a charity organization, Dr. K.A. Paul, talking about how he presided over negotiations to try to arrange a peace in Libya. Now, he was involved with General Wesley Clark as well as Representative Dennis Kucinich. And as he said, when they worked through this, and of course he'd had experience counseling work with King Hussein of Jordan and with Yasser Arafat, he pointed out that they had an agreement and Hillary Clinton proceeded with this anyway. As he sees it from his perspective, this was Hillary Clinton's war. She bragged, we came, we saw, he died. And what's more interesting about this, he says it's well known that Libya at the time, that Gaddafi supported Obama over Clinton in the 2008 presidential race. Her representatives went to Gaddafi and asked for money. He refused her, and he subsequently died. As a result, a lot of people, like the $32 million that was subsequently paid to the Clinton Foundation by the Bahrain people, was that for access to Hillary Clinton, or was it for protection from Hillary Clinton? It's his opinion, he says, that states like Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates are all silently terrified at the prospect of Hillary Clinton becoming the next president of the United States. Anyone who doesn't want to see the United States turned into a RICO gangster organization even further than it is now should be very concerned about that prospect. And if we look at the types of tricks that we have seen in the past, we have news that has surfaced from RT. Pentagon paid a PR firm $540 million to make fake terrorist video. They say they paid $500 million to create fake videos in Iraq. This is a secret propaganda campaign that's been exposed by the Bureau of Investigative Journalism. They say both the White House and General David Petraeus at the time, and of course this is the guy who shared classified information with his mistress, and of course got away with it as well, just like Hillary Clinton, signed off on the content that was produced by the agency. A former employee, Martin Wells, told the Bureau how he found himself working in Iraq after being hired as a video editor by Bell Pottinger. Within 48 hours, he said he was landing in Baghdad to edit content for secret psyops at Camp Victory. What did they do? Well, they created scripts and filmed Arab soap operas. Of course, we also have the CIA creating scripts for American companies, don't they? Showing the things that they want us to see. Showing the CIA, showing the FBI always as the noble saviors of mankind, never as people who are setting up false flag events. The firm also created fake al-Qaeda propaganda videos, he said, which were then planted by the military in the homes that they raided. So we have what is emerging, and we see continually from Hillary Clinton, a pattern of setting the world on fire, creating chaos, creating destruction everywhere they go. And of course, part of that is economic warfare. They not only have revived the Cold War, they not only have brought us to the brink of World War III, provoking Russia and the Ukraine and Crimea, as well as getting into Syria and Iraq, fighting them as they're trying to fight ISIS and threatening to shoot down Russian planes, threatening to put in a no-fly zone. And of course, it was General Petraeus himself who just said last week, we could do that. We could do that very, very quickly at no loss to ourselves, because we could just use cruise missiles and other missiles to shoot down Russian and Syrian planes. Okay, yeah, there's some consequences that need to be thought about with that. But it's not just the two hotspots that have been created, the creation of ISIS out of Libya, arming and starting the war in both Syria and Iraq, the revival of the Cold War in Ukraine, but it is also economic warfare that is now taking place between the U.S. and the EU in terms of our regulatory punishment of their industries. We see now that Deutsche Bank is having difficulty presenting cash this last week. Now, they blamed it on an IT outage, but there may be more than that. This is shaping up to look like is a classic run on the bank. Why is this happening? Well, there is a pending $14 billion fine that America has slapped the German bank with. And understand that when you look at German banks, you can just substitute the EU itself. Now, this happened within just a couple of days of America, the EU rather, putting a $14 billion fine on Apple. And what is this fine on Deutsche Bank for? Is for activities that are about 10 years old, activities that predated the 2008 crash. So they waited for 10 years, and they did it a couple of days after the EU fined Apple, and they did it at exactly the same amount of money, $14 billion, $14 billion. And of course, the Germans understand what this is. This is economic warfare. But it also shows us that the globalists are telling us, they say that if we have nationalism, we're going to have trade wars. That it's inevitable. We're going to have that kind of competition. There are always going to be interests that are protected. What are the interests that are being protected? It's not countries now, but favored corporations. So the U.S. is fighting for Apple. The Germans are fighting for the protection of Deutsche Bank. And I think prior to that, even Volkswagen, the fines that were put upon Volkswagen. So we see across the board, Obama and Hillary Clinton shaking people down for money, starting wars to threaten people, creating economic warfare, which isn't supposed to happen with globalism, just as we were not supposed to have any more boom and bust cycles after we created the central banks, and yet we did. So this is happening across the world. And at the same time, we see an agreement this last week. At the end of the week, we were told that OPEC had agreed to cut production so that they could increase oil prices. Oil prices have collapsed because the worldwide economy is collapsing, and because there is massive competition with Saudis domestically. Our domestic production has gone up, so they targeted fracking and other industries here in the United States for competition. They thought they could drive them out of business by taking the price lower, so they maintained their production rates in the face of falling demand, and we have seen oil collapse with that. And yet, what it looks like at first glance that they have thrown in the towel on this economic warfare, it turns out that may not be the case. We learned on Friday that it really wasn't an agreement, as this is pointed out by New American. It wasn't really an agreement to cut production. After all, it was an agreement that was hammered out after 6 long and reportedly testy hours behind closed doors in a side meeting in Algeria to appoint a committee to study the matter and come up with options that the cartel will consider at its next meeting in November in Vienna. This is what is awaiting us in an uncertain world. This is why we need to be very concerned about what is going to happen to our economy and who is going to look after the interests of America and not after their self-interest.
Thousands of years ago, there was a basic form of chivalry. Our ancestors would hear the drums of war, giving the warriors of the tribe a chance to organize and prepare a defense. 60 years ago, when foreign air forces were approaching filled with bombs, they had drums of their own, air raid sirens. But in the 21st century, there are silent weapons for quiet war. Pathogens added to the food and water, into the lining of plastics that destroy our vitality, turn off our hormones, and accelerate our journey towards death. I personally counter this onslaught with Anthroplex. Anthroplex is designed with known organic concentrated herbs to create the basic foundation to normal metabolic activity inside the human body. Discover why Anthroplex is turning so many heads today. It's time for us to take our bodies back into our own hands, and it starts at InfoWarsLife.com with Anthroplex.